Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Your Gun Doctor here. Today we're going to talk about graphic settings in Warzone Season 3 and Warzone in general for every system, bad to elite. Which settings should you choose to have the best, smooth, stutter-free gaming experience? We're not talking about ultra maximum FPS. That's unnecessary. We're talking about really the smoothest and stutter-freest experience available. We're going to go through all the settings and we're going to show you some tricks and some tools that you might have not heard of yet that will, for every kind of system, improve your performance significantly. There's going to be timestamps in the description below where you're going to click through. Some of these things are trivial for you. Some of these things are more advanced for others. Two things that you should change up front. If you recently changed any part of your system and haven't reinstalled Warzone yet, delete your advanced options .ini and your Warzone on start will make a new one for your new system parts that is better optimized than the old one that was for the old system parts. That sounds very trivial, but if you installed a new graphic card, if you get a new RAM, if you get a new CPU, whatever, delete that thing if you haven't reinstalled Warzone recently. Then Bnet X launcher optimizations. You go on the top left corner, settings, and what you're going to do is on game launch, exit Bnet launcher completely. The Bnet launcher doesn't take that many resources, but it does tank a little bit. And there's no reason to have it on in the background if you're just going to be sitting in your Warzone. So just go on exit Bnet completely on game launch. And most importantly, turn off browser acceleration because you don't need any hardware to accelerate this browser. You don't need anything to get clocked up in the system. Get rid of it. Let's start with the general tab. First and most important setting that will actually affect your FPS drastically is the field of view. The most efficient FPS to field of view setting is 90, surprisingly. That is where you usually should be getting your best FPS. So if you're playing on an absolute low-end system and you're wondering, stuttering, low FPS, everything is shitty, well, 90 is the vibe here. I play on 115, which actually exceeds an optimum because the 110 is also kind of a sweet spot for good system from FPS to field of view. Obviously, choose something you're comfortable with here because there's no use playing 90 when you can't see anything and you're feeling caged in and you feel like a console player. So go for what is best for you there, but keep in mind that the most efficient range is 90 to 110. I do 115 because it feels the most natural and best for me. Also, if you change your field of view, you might have to toy a little bit with your mouse sensitivity to get it used in again for the enhanced field of view. Also, on a side note, since this is being asked a lot, affected is the vibe. You're gonna skip introduction movie, skip tooltips. That's just something to have enabled generally. Might want to turn off the dismemberment and gore effects, and the only reason to do that is if you're in a close quarter combat engagement and there are gore effects, blood and dismemberment, that might actually clock your field of vision with unnecessary things and give you a less smoother experience. This is a little thing that's not really performance, that's just having a better close quarter combat fighting experience, considering that you might be using dismemberment gore effects or your teammates are using dismemberment and gore effects. Now over to the graphic settings. If you want to have the least input delay and the best, smoothest gaming experience possible, full screen should be your vibe over borderless. Now that being said, on some systems, Borderless does work better. I use Borderless because I have 6 screens. I'm a streamer and I need to swap between them. So for me, full screen is not an option because I can't alt tab out of the computer. But as we do know, full screen is the vibe over full screen Borderless for really the least input delay and for the best feeling for the game. If you do full screen Borderless, the number one thing you also need to do is you need to go to your Nvidia control panel by right-clicking on your desktop, manage 3D settings, global, and you need to turn off VSync for the whole computer. Because if you're actually having VSync turned on and you're running full screen borderless, that can sometimes cause weird stuttering, especially when you tab out or when you have a second window open. Have your screen refresh rate to set what your monitor gives away. Also, your render resolution should always be at 100% what your monitor has to offer. My display resolution is 2560 x 1440. As you can see here right now, my render resolution of 100% is actually not what it is here. If you have the same problem, let me show you how to fix this. Again, you're going into your Nvidia control panel, 3D settings, and you see the DSR factors. That for some reason sometimes turns on. I actually had to turn off so that that would be working already. You're going to put this off. No DSR factors, nothing. And then your render resolution is actually going to display also your display resolution and not this weird value anymore. I would keep this as 100% of my resolution. So I do 2560, 1440, 100%, 2560, 1440. There's no reason to overdo it here, even if you're using DLSS, but we're going to talk about that later more. VSync is obviously disabled, and very important, custom frame rate limit. Don't limit your frame rates. The reason for that is if you do limit your frame rates, you're going to ruin your frame timing because the method being used by Call of Duty is very inefficient. But I'll show you something at the end of the video of a more efficient method to actually limit your frame timings, to limit your frames so that it works better. Disable NVIDIA highlights, that is absolutely unnecessary and will take power from your system. And it comes down to the NVIDIA Reflex low latency settings. If you're on a desktop PC that has the option, definitely go for enabled plus boost. If you're on a laptop, you might just choose enabled because that works better. If you don't have the option, well, that's unfortunate. But if it's available for you, definitely enable and boost. Now let's go through all these settings. And as I said, my goal is here not maximum FPS. It is the best stutter-free, good-looking experience. And I'll tell you also which setting has an effect on FPS so you can toy with that yourself. You want to set the streaming quality to normal. That just gives you the smoothest look for the game. When it comes down to texture resolution, you want to set that to normal but not exceeded. With normal, you have a minor FPS impact, but the overall quality of the game tremendously gets increased. The texture filter can be set to high. It has an absolute minor FPS on the impact, but it just does make everything tremendously more beautiful. When it comes down to particle quality, I would set this to high for one simple reason. In the distance, there are some objects that have like some blur and some wobble around them, and that can actually be avoided by setting particle quality too high, by giving you just a minor impact on the FPS. Bullet impacts and sprays has no effect on FPS, but it will clutter your vision. So if you want to see the most, turn it off. I obviously have it turned on for my gun testing because I need to freaking hell see bullet impacts and sprays. But realistically, hey, you know when you're running into a building and someone sprayed people everywhere and that scare you and you start suddenly shooting that spray? Well, guess what? Just turn sprays off. You'll never get bamboozled again. And I know you've been getting bamboozled. When it comes down to tessellation, if you have it disabled, you do actually see models of players better in regard of the background. If you have it on all, it just overall looks smoother, better, everything fits together, best visual experience, best competitive, having players really stand out is disabled. I've always had on-demand texture streaming on, but what I noticed is if you do actually have it disabled, it helps with your FPS and with your input lag and just makes the game feel smoother. When it comes down to shadow map resolution, low is actually not better than normal because when you have them put to normal, player models pop out a little bit better. The same goes for particle lightning. Both of these on low are okay, but with normal, it's just that player models pop out a little bit better. And then cache spot shadows and cache sun shadows, definitely turn them off. Better FPS. Ray tracing, don't activate that apart from if you want to just ruin every single FPS you have. Ambient occlusion is definitely disabled, makes player models stand out further, and definitely makes your game run better. When it comes down to screen space reflection, disabled is the 100% best FPS setting. With a low, you actually render in the lightning a little bit better to make it not look so blocky and ugly and just give you a smoother experience. So you'll have to choose yourself here if you want the most perfect FPS or just the light look a little bit better to have a way smoother game. Now we're coming to the most asked setting, DLSS. I can turn it on. I have a 3080 and I play in a 2K resolution. So for me, it's best and works best to put on the quality setting plus my respective Nvidia filters that I'm using for it. The link to my Nvidia filter video is in the description below. Then on top of that, everything else is disabled, and that gives me really the best FPS, picture quality, and amazing running game. Now, I do know not every one of you has DLSS, so how would you set the settings now if you don't have it? If you want the best FPS, anti-aliasing off, but we know how the game looks, it's shitty. So if you want to have better edges, the game overall looking better, and everything being rendered in cleaner, SMA 1X at the max. Not more needed. Now we talked about limiting your FPS before, which was very bad. You should set it on unlimited, but you have dynamic render resolution. What it does is renders the games to achieve the FPS you would really like to have in every situation. Now, obviously, it would be terrible to set this to 144 FPS if your system does not constantly achieve that. Where you're actually setting dynamic render resolution is to the lower bottom of your FPS. Let's say your average is 120, but you experience in certain situations a dip down to 90 FPS. Then you're going to set that to 90 FPS. If you're mostly playing with 30 to 50 FPS, you're not going to set this to 60, because if you set this to 60, you're going to have blur, blur, and blur happening. You would actually set this down to 30 or even 20 FPS. then the game will render in every situation accordingly to your FPS to make you have the best possible experience. This might lead to a little bit of blur in the long ranges and could be annoying, but if you set this correctly according to your minimal FPS, it will overall smoothen out the game and increase your game experience. For me, it is, I have a 144 Hz display, but I don't achieve 144 Hz constantly because my CPU is only 2700X. I mostly run around everything from 110, 120 average, but I do have dips down to the 90. So I would set this to 90, and overall, my smoothness of the game improves. Now, we all like to use Nvidia game filters, but we also know that Nvidia game filters impact your FPS tremendously. So you want to turn them off and do actually use your normal Nvidia control panel to do your Nvidia game filters. Again, there's a video in the description below with timestamps that really explains this to you. You can do the whole Nvidia game filter thing without impacting a single FPS by just using the normal Nvidia control panel color setting. Now let's get some basic Windows optimizations in. By pressing Windows button and entering game mode, you're going to get into game mode settings. And very interestingly enough, if you do actually turn this on, the shittier your PC is, the better the gains from this is going to be. It's a minimal thing, but setting this game mode on will actually improve your Windows system. Most important though, turn the Xbox game bar off. If you've never turned the Xbox game bar off, please tell me in the comments below. That is something you need to get rid of straight away. Now, there's an interesting option. It's called hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. Reduces latency and improves performance. You'll need to restart PC to have effects on this. This is a setting I can't tell you to turn on or off because I've had it on two PCs. On the one PC, I've had gains with it. On the other PC, I didn't have. That was 3080 versus 2080. But it's not even on the graphic cards. It was also different RAM, different CPUs and stuff like that. So my 3080 PC actually profits from having this, but my 2080 PC does not profit from having this. So you need to try this out. Start your game without and start your game with. Measure your FPS, do the exact same things. Be in the plane, drop out until you're on the ground. Look at your FPS, how they have been behaving, and then do the same with it on or off. You're going to find this by Windows button and just simple graphics setting. Also, as always, the power and sleep settings. You want to go there, additional power settings, and the most important part is set it to high performance. Yes, this is weird. If you have this unbalanced, it might impact your FPS, but having this on high performance definitely yields the best outcome for your system. Now there's another Windows optimization you can do, and I didn't know of this until late. My friend Sapien made me aware of that. It's called the ISLC program. This program allows you to free up background resources like the RAM and reduce overall the input lag, improves FPS and the response time of your PC by constantly just checking your RAM, deleting the RAM files, and taking also care of the memory leak. You know, memory leak when your PC, when you're running Warzone and slowly your game gets worse and worse and worse, and you're asking yourself, what is happening? No problem. ISLC will help you. Let me show you how to set it up. The way you're going to set this up is the list size is going to be 1024. Then the free memory is lower than is going to be half of what your system memory has to offer. So I have 32 gigabytes up here. I'm going to set it to 1600. If you only have 8 GB available, 4000. You're going to change the wanted timer resolution to 0.5, enable custom timer resolution, and the ISLC polling rate for lower end systems, 1000, for medium to high end systems, 500. Then you're going to purge the standby list, press start, and the program is now running in the background. You're going to leave it up running in the background, and it's going to make your system respond smoother, faster, better FPS, lesser input lag, no memory leak. All in all, just an overall improved performance. I was really bamboozled by this working so good. Thank you again, Sapien, for making me aware of this. Now, there's another thing to do when your game just feels off. You know, Season 3 just dropped and you lost 30, 40, 70, 80 FPS and things are just being weird. Again, you can just delete the advanced options INI to have your system remake a new one as you start the game to see if that already clocks and frees up your system. But it's also going to delete all the settings we just set. So keep that in mind. Especially delete the advanced option INI before you do anything that we just said, and then just redo all of it. But what you can do here is very important. You can have your render worker count. You're going to go into your task manager, performance, CPU, and down here you're going to see your cores and logical processors. And you're going to set your render worker count to half what you have available. Again, if you do this, it might work. it might also cause stutter on your system. So this is not a 100% solution. This is not 100% going to make it better. Play a little bit around with this value. You should set it to half what you have available in physical cores, which is 8 for me, but it might also be working if you put it on 4, 3, 5, or if it just stays on 6 as it was for me. So this is not a 100%, but it can help your system tremendously. When it comes down to the video memory scale, the standard is 0.9. You can play a little bit around it with this and see what it does. Generally advised, a value of 0.6 can help your system tremendously. But this also depends on like how good your parts of the PC are playing together and how strong your graphic card actually is. So try out 0.6 and see if that smoothens out your experience. Might not necessarily yield into higher FPS, but in smoother FPS. That's the point here, that you're not having the dips and the dibbles happening so much. Play around with this value as also to see how much it helps you to increase it. Now let's see what we can do in the Nvidia control panel to actually help with overall graphical performance. You're going to go into the manage 3D settings, and there's one setting that's really important, and that's texture filtering. It's base set to quality, but you actually can set this to high performance to improve your system overall. It might reduce visual experience, but it will definitely improve your FPS tremendously. Play around with this. If you like the high performance setting, if you don't like it, turn it off, but it will 100% help your system. Remember when we talked about capping your FPS? Now let me show you how to properly cap your FPS so you have an overall smoother game experience. Funny story, you will probably have less high-end FPS with this option, but overall your whole game is smoother, better, consistent. Frame timing is good, and the frame timing is very important because the worse your frame timing, the less amazing the game is going to feel, the less responsive and snappy it's going to be. You're going to read your frame timing as low as possible. What you're going to do is you're going to press the Add button, navigate to your Call of Duty Modern Warfare, select the Call of Duty Modern Warfare X and add it. Detection level medium, then you're going to go for the frame rate limit. And frame rate limit you're going to set to the minimum frames you usually get. So let's say my system runs up to 140. I have 110 to 120 most of the time, and the lowest I get is 90. So I'm averaging around 100 frames. So you're going to set this to 100 frames. Works very good. If your system is 70 to 90 FPS, you're mostly around like 80, 85, but you drop down to 72, it would be advised to actually set it down to 70. Now that's 20 FPS less, and you're like, the fuck, Pony, that can't be real. It actually is, because you have 70 FPS with a lower frame timing, feeling smooth, feeling snappy, improved gameplay. The maximum FPS does not matter in this regard. You want to have the smoothest FPS experience possible with the lowest frame timing to feel the best response on what is happening. If you now want to measure if these settings actually have any impact on your system or how much the impact is, you're going to go monitoring, scroll all the way down, frame rate, frame time on in the MSI Afterburner. You're going to show on-screen display, text and graph, and then you get everything easily running. Apply this here, then on-screen display, set the button and go for it. And now one last setting to set to avoid any stutter in the game. And that would be going for your dynamic resolution frame target again. We have the DSR on, you remember, and we set it to 90. And this should be roughly 10 frames below your frame rate cap that we just set. So my frame rate cap is at 100. And now if I actually drop below 100, if it would drastically go down, 90, 85, then the dynamic render resolution is going to kick in. So we should already be more stable because we actually limited our frame rate to a point that is 20 FPS lower than we usually have, smoothing out the FPS tremendously and giving me an overall better performance and smoother feel for the game, lowering our frame timing. Now, if there's still a dip happening to whatsoever, many overloading effects and so on, then the dynamic render resolution is going to grip in, but not so harsh anymore because it doesn't have to render resolution down from 120, 30 FPS dip to 90. No, it's only a 10 FPS dip that he has to compensate for graphic-wise to then keep your system up and running without any huge, humongous stutter happening. Boom. Fixed. Let's get it. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me in the description below. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me in the comments below, what do you think? Did it help you? Did this do anything for you? Has your system improved with these settings? I would like to see it for your system. I've done all these steps now. I've done them for a while already, and my system all in all has improved tremendously. My frame times have gone down. My game has felt smoother. Obviously, depending on your high-end system and how good your system is, these settings will be different. These settings will have a different impact to what is happening for you. Most importantly, again, Nvidia filters. Do the Nvidia filter trick in the description below with the Nvidia filter video, where you actually set the filters through the control panel, because that's already giving you 10 to 15% FPS more than you will be having had before. Thanks for watching so much. Don't forget to subscribe. Again, Sapien, thanks for making me aware of the ILCS program. Highly recommend to run that. Makes your whole game experience way smoother. I wish you all a fantastic good day. Find your way back very soon for more amazing Warzone content, and definitely drop your FPS numbers now in the comment section. I want to see how many FPS you're getting. Did it net into an FPS gain? Did it net into an FPS stability? That's the most important part, because we don't care about more FPS. We care about smoother, better, low frame timing FPS for a snappy game response feeling. Have a great day. See you soon in Verdansk.